Yeah, so I wanted to spend a few minutes talking through uh, a topic we've talked about in the past, and the the context for this was a KEP that's been open for a while around workgroup reliability, around trying to come up with ways to quantify and sort of standardize, and in some cases automate reliability indicators. That So I linked to the KEP from the agenda, and it's been open for a while, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. And a lot of the discussion in that KEP is focused on how do we accurately measure reliability and concerns around like enforcement that would be based on that measurement, and whether that would be accurate and whether it would be fair. And I think those concerns are legitimate, and I'd like to see us try to keep working through some of those. But there were a couple comments. Daniel had a comment, and then I had a response. So Daniel's comment was talking about like every contribution that gets accepted has like positive value for the project, or we wouldn't accept it. The project gets some value P of C greater than 0, which I love, Daniel. I love that our contributor interactions get turned into equations. But and I was thinking about that, and I think in isolation, that's probably true. It's usually true. But I'm not convinced actually that every contribution that gets an LGTM approve actually had a net positive value. So you can imagine cases where the tests passed and CI was happy, but this actually broke something that we didn't have good test coverage for. Or it introduced a bug that was latent because some other bit of code was confusing, and that impact wasn't really considered when just looking at narrowly, is this change a reasonable change to merge? And so I think there are externalities that are not always considered when we're LGTM approving changes. And the reliability KEP is kind of trying to figure out like a top-down way to get visibility to those externalities, to say like, how are we measuring reliability? And if those measurements get to a certain point, what actions can we take to like put the brakes on until we restore those measurements back to where they were? So that's sort of a top-down approach. And I realized that some of the things I assume reviewers and approvers are doing when they're deciding whether to accept a particular change may not actually be happening. And so I wanted to kind of talk in this context to, it's not exactly bottom up, it's more like middle up. Like the people who are on this call are in many cases responsible for deciding whether a given change is a good direction, and whether the thing it's wanting to change is in a state that can accept that change. And so I wanted to at least talk through some of the things that I'm considering when I'm looking at proposals or pull requests, and make sure that all of you are aware of these and considering these, and hopefully making use of these signals and tools to make decisions in your areas. So there were a few different indicators that we have that I wanted to make sure you all are aware of and encourage you to help improve as you're working in your areas. So the first one is a label that we can put on issues or pull requests, which is the kind regression label. So we added this a couple of years ago maybe, and this can be added alongside like bug or cleanup or whatever. So something can be both a bug and a regression. But the intent here is to capture cases where something that used to work no longer works. And this gives us visibility to areas where we had test gaps. Like everything that merges past, CI, it passed our tests. And if something that used to work no longer works, that means that we didn't have good test coverage for it. And so when you're working in your area, if we release 123 or 122 or 124, and then you get a bug report, it's like, oh, I upgraded and this thing that used to work stopped working. Like people are good at jumping on issues and driving fixes and backporting fixes. So that's great. Don't stop doing that. But throw the kind regression label on that so we can have visibility to when our tests didn't actually catch something. And as a corollary, like if a fix or an issue is related to a regression, we definitely want at minimum to have tests go in with the fix that would prevent that same regression from happening again. So if you're putting kind regression on something, there should definitely be a test that would have caught the thing in the first place. In the community meeting, the March 17th community meeting, which I linked to as well from the agenda, we were talking with the release team about how to get visibility to how our reliability is doing. And one of the things that I would like to see us start tracking in an automated way, I've done some manual tracking of this in the past, but in an automated way, looking at the changes that are getting taken back to release branches and seeing how many of them are regressions, fixing regressions. We take a few different categories of changes back to release branches, like security fixes, fixes to bugs which have existed for a long time and we just noticed them for whatever reason and it was severe enough to take back to release branches. But then the third kind is like actually restoring functionality to a release that got broken in that release. And so labeling these things consistently will help us get visibility to that. So that's the first signal that we have, these regression labels. That said, that's a trailing indicator, right? Like we don't know if you're fixing a regression, that means it already broke. And so ideally we want to do things to reduce the number of these that occur in the first place. So the second indicator that we have is bugs in your SIG or your area that are labeled as important. So important soon or important long-term, or I guess even critical urgent. We've got a couple of those. First of all, take a look. Hopefully you're looking at bugs in your area. And if bugs are mislabeled priority-wise, like definitely fix the labels. Like if something is labeled priority, important long-term, and it's not actually that important, it's sort of a nit or a nice to have, like by all means, relabel it to backlog or something like that. But assuming these are accurate, it's how long it takes those bugs that we've sort of accepted and prioritized, how long it takes those to get resolved can be a good signal about where we're allocating development effort. And it can be a good signal to tell us how healthy a given area is. So if a new KEP is wanting to make some changes or additions to something, but we've got like 5 priority important bugs that have been open for a year on that area, that component, specifically intersecting with sort of the area that this new KEP is intending to do stuff with, it's worth asking the question, like, which should take priority? Ideally, we could do both, but the fact that these bugs have lived here for a year, we're clearly not doing both. So which should take priority? For some of the bigger components, you might need to go down to like a more granular level than just SIG or component. So use your judgment there. But if the bug really is like right in the area where a KEP is wanting to move stuff around or change stuff, my perspective is generally that we need to fix the important bugs we already have before we start like adding new change to a thing. So again, the 2 things you can do in your area is make sure like the priority labeling on your bugs matches reality. And then when you're looking at plans for a new release, take a look at the changes that are being proposed, but also at the bugs that are important and have been there for a while, and use that to inform like where you put effort first. The next indicator is test flakes. These are always with us. We have dashboards. The triage board can do a SIG focused view of test flakes. It's not perfect. It'll sometimes flag like your SIG's test failing in a job that like it's actually a problem with the job config. So sometimes you have to filter out like the job because the job itself is problematic. But at least being aware of if there are flakes related to your SIG, especially like the unit test level. Unit and integration tests, we got our integration tests stabilized finally, I think, in this past release, which is really great. So at this point, if you're seeing flakes in unit and integration tests related to your SIG, that should be like a high priority item. The E2E tests, there tends to be more noise depending on what job is running, but unit and integration tests, those flakes should really get some attention. Just as an anecdote, the times when we've really focused on driving down flakes, we often will catch real bugs as a result. A lot of the sort of race condition flakes turn out to be bugs in real logic, not just test logic. So don't look at that purely as a test health exercise. Like until you actually figure out what the flake is, it's maybe not even odds, but it's a non-0% chance that this is a real bug that's like hitting real edge cases in production, and you can fix it by fixing the flake. The theme for all of these, and we'll get to the last one in a second, but the theme for all of these is capture these things in issues and like describe what the problem is and the importance of it with labels and descriptions. If this stuff isn't visible in issues, then it's really hard to pull together all these signals into a coherent picture of health in your area. And so this last issue is sort of a follow-up to the regression issue. So when you have a regression, that means like a narrow piece of functionality that used to work broke. And by all means, like fix that as quickly as possible, as tactically as possible, with test coverage. That's the priority, is to sort of restore the functionality of an existing release. But it's worth asking, almost like a postmortem on a regression, like, is this a category of issue that we're missing tests on? And sometimes the answer will be no. Like sometimes it's, the tests that get added with the regression fix are totally sufficient. And if that's the case, that's fine. But sometimes it can be a symptom of a category of tests that we're missing. And this is especially the case if you're seeing multiple regressions in a particular area. And so in addition to just fixing the targeted regression and adding a targeted test for that, I would like to see us opening sort of postmortem type issues tracking categories of test coverage that are missing, and say like this component had 3 or 4 or 5 regressions in this area, and we fixed those regressions, but we actually don't have a lot of confidence in this category of functionality here. And those issues, we need to be opening those issues with descriptions, like specific descriptions of the area and the type of change and the category of test, and then weighing those open issues against new features wanting to move stuff around or change stuff in that area. So similar to longstanding bugs, issues tracking test gaps that we know have actually led to regressions. And so the theme across all of these is having issues, tracking them, and then considering those issues when you're considering the health of an area and its ability to accept change. So hopefully many of you know about these and are using some or all of these already. But the sort of closing the loop with having it affect our plans for features is what I want to see us doing. And this can be, it can be discouraging to a contributor who, they have a proposal for a feature and like there's nothing wrong with their proposal, and even the code that they've written as part of their feature may be super well tested. Hopefully it is. Hopefully we're requiring that. It can be really discouraging to say, like, there's nothing wrong with your idea. Your idea is good. Your design is good. Your code is good. And your tests are good. But it's changing an area where we had 5 regressions and we know we haven't solidified our test coverage. If we're going to tell a contributor like that, like, I'm sorry, this area is not healthy enough to accept your change. We need to be super clear about why, like specifically why. And so that's where like having the specific issues with the specific descriptions, like this is what the prereqs are to making more changes in this area, because we have a responsibility to contributors, to be timely in our reviews and feedback, but we also have a responsibility to our users to not break them on upgrade. Like in some ways, it doesn't matter how many awesome features are in a new release if along with those features come regressions that keep our users from upgrading to that new release. And so we have to balance those responsibilities. And so having clearly captured, regressions and bugs and test gap issues that we can use to judge health and prioritize, like, this is a great feature. Before we take this feature, we have to stabilize X, Y, and Z, is what I would like to see us doing. So that's what I've got. And hopefully this will help in communicating and prioritizing and getting a sense for the health of areas. And the clearer we are in capturing these issues, these are great, like, help wanted issues. If we're looking for things, like concrete things for people to contribute to, beyond like, help document, like these are really concrete ways people can help. Here's a long-standing bug. We as the leads can say, here's the steps that need to happen to resolve this bug. This is what we need to do before we make more changes right in this area. That's all I got. You can stop the recording.
Okay.